To many, Greenland looks like one of the last places on Earth anyone would fight over. It's remote, frozen, barely populated, and most people barely think about it. But Greenland actually sits right on top of a new global crossroads, where shipping routes are changing, missiles travel over the pole, and major powers quietly compete for resources, bases, and influence. So the real question isn't, why would the US want Greenland? It's this: what happens if Washington decides it simply can't afford not to control it? To understand why the United States would even consider attacking Greenland, you first have to look at how the Arctic has changed. For decades, it seemed cold, remote, and irrelevant. That era is over. Melting ice opened new shipping routes, and the region is now a future economic and military highway. Greenland sits right in the middle of it. Geographically, it's North American, but politically tied to Europe through Denmark. And in Washington, that combination turned it from interesting into strategically unavoidable. Here's why that view hardened. US administration increasingly frames the Western Hemisphere as something they must secure first. The Venezuela operation reinforced that. If Washington sees a threat, it will act, with or without diplomacy. Then Greenland shifted from Europe's backyard to America's front yard. When control moved from US European Command to Northern Command, the message was clear. This is now part of Homeland Defense. From there, the logic moved fast. Greenland hosts critical infrastructure. Pituffik Space Base provides early warning for missiles launched over the pole. Losing even minutes of warning time changes a lot. The GI-UK gap matters too, the corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. Russian submarines must pass through it to threaten Atlantic routes. Access to Greenlandic ports and airfields is key for tracking them. And then there are the minerals. Greenland has rare earth elements the US currently depends on China to process, especially the heavy elements used in jets, missiles, and advanced magnets. The Tanbreeze project, a major rare earth mine in southern Greenland, offers exactly those resources, and with fewer political obstacles than other mines. The legal side. Before tanks or ships enter the discussion, the first battlefield is legal. Greenland belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark, but it has self-government and an officially recognized right to self-determination. That independence gives Greenland full control over its territory, and it opens a door the United States can step through. Instead of invading, Washington could push, mainly with money, for Greenland to choose full independence from Denmark, then immediately sign a defense and economic deal. Greenland becomes a sovereign country, but closely aligned with the United States. It would look a lot like America's agreements with several Pacific Island nations. They run their own governments and sit at the UN, while the US manages defense, limits foreign military access, and provides aid. For Greenlandic nationalists, that's appealing: independence, infrastructure, and investment. For Washington, it means formal, exclusive access, and China and Russia are locked out. The main obstacle is Denmark. Even though the process exists in Danish law, Copenhagen could refuse the final step, triggering a constitutional crisis and heavy pressure across Europe. Then there's NATO. Denmark is a NATO member. If the US used force, Denmark could technically invoke Article 5. The clause that says an attack on one is an attack on all. On paper, that would make the US the aggressor. In reality, it's hard to imagine Europe going to war with Washington. Far more likely is paralysis, mistrust, and a push for Europe to build up its own defense, instead of relying on the US. And that raises another question. What happens to all the US bases across Europe that are routinely used for operations, including in the Middle East? So there are basically two paths this could go. The soft path. The soft annexation works through money. Greenland currently relies heavily on a Danish block grant that covers a significant part of its public budget. The United States could simply triple that support and instantly remove most financial problems. Then add direct cash dividends to citizens. With roughly 56,000 residents, even $1 million payout per person is cheaper than most large-scale defense programs, but life-changing for Greenlanders. Next is infrastructure. Airports, ports, paved runways, telecom upgrades, hospitals. Projects Denmark has struggled to fund suddenly get built. At that point, the story shifts from US takeover to something else entirely, a partnership promising prosperity, independence, and global recognition. The final piece is the Compact of Free Association style agreement. Greenland maintains sovereignty and a UN seat, but the United States receives exclusive defense control and the ability to deny rival military access. This also secures US control over key bases and protects American interests. To get there, the US would apply pressure in subtle ways. US diplomats would talk directly with Greenland's leaders instead of going through Copenhagen. Media and NGOs might highlight Danish neglect while praising US investment. The message would be simple: staying under Denmark is risky. Partnering with Washington is safer and richer. The implicit signal is always in the background. Cooperate now or risk a harsher option later. In most realistic simulations, this is the path that succeeds. It's cheaper, quieter, and far less riskier than war. And it offers enough benefits that many Greenlanders might see it as an opportunity, not an occupation. Hard path. The military option exists for one reason: a scenario where Washington believes rivals are about to gain permanent foothold on the island, or where Greenland or Denmark refuse cooperation entirely. The objective would not be occupation of every village. Instead, the operation would target a few strategic locations and present Denmark with a fast, irreversible reality. The likely plan begins with seizing Kangerlussuaq Airport. It has the only runway capable of handling large, heavily loaded strategic transport aircraft. Once secured, it becomes the logistical bridge for additional forces. Next comes Nuuk, the capital and main port. U.S. Navy assets could secure maritime access, while Marines moved to control government buildings, telecommunications hubs, and critical port infrastructure. Meanwhile, Patuxent Space Base shifts to maximum protection status. The United States already operates there, so rather than capturing it, forces would harden defenses, control access, and prevent sabotage. In the remote northeast, Denmark's symbolic presence consists mainly of the Sirius Dog Sled Patrol. These teams are skilled Arctic survivalists, but have no realistic ability to fight mechanized forces or modern air power. They would likely be ordered to observe, report, and avoid direct confrontation. Denmark's capacity to counter such a move militarily is extremely limited. A few patrol ships, rotational fighter deployments, and small garrisons are not designed to fight a superpower. Any response would almost certainly shift from military to diplomatic channels. The United States could take control of Greenland in a matter of hours. Worst case, 1 to 2 days. But the geopolitical price would be enormous. NATO would be shattered, if not basically over. European governments would start seeing the US as unreliable, and many would probably start calling for a united European army. Meanwhile, Russia and China would use the situation as a talking point, arguing that powerful countries can simply seize territory whenever they want. So, they should be allowed to do the same. Taiwan, Baltics, Ukraine, Japan, and South Korea might get into trouble. Inside Greenland, resistance probably wouldn't take the form of regular battles. It would likely be protests, strikes, and sabotage. The question is whether it would make much of a difference. The aftermath. In most realistic scenarios, Washington eventually realizes that a full military takeover would backfire. It would wreck relationships with allies and drag the US into a long, expensive mess. All for something it could probably achieve legally anyway. The political economic route solves the problem with far less risk. But hey, what's your take on this? And if you're wondering whether the US could conquer both Americas, check out the video on your screen. Thanks for watching.